Something caught her eye, barely visible, half buried in dust. She stopped walking, didn't raise her voice, didn't panic. "We should check this." Someone laughed behind her. Another kept walking, boots crushed forward through the silence. "You're being paranoid." No one slowed down, not yet. The sun kept burning, the wind shifted, and something beneath the ground waited. They didn't see it, they didn't want to. By the time they understood why she stopped, everything had already changed. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, and let us know where you're listening from. The desert didn't lie, it simply watched and waited. The sun bore down over the Nevada basin like a silent predator. Dry wind swept across the rocks, pushing sand into the crevices of rusted debris left over from forgotten wars. 6 figures moved in staggered formation, part of a routine route clearance along the southern sector. Their weapons were clean, their confidence even cleaner. But one of them wasn't like the others. Lieutenant Amelia Blake, recently reassigned, walked middle column. Her steps were calculated, her gaze alert, a decorated seal. She had the credentials, but not the trust of this team. To them, she was just the new one, a woman with a file full of ribbons and too little face time in their unit. At 0946 hours, she stopped. No command, no panic, just stopped. She stared at the ground. A glint, barely there, like a reflection swallowed by dirt. "Possible anomaly," she said evenly, pointing near a half-buried irrigation pipe. Sergeant Leo Kramer looked over his shoulder and laughed. "You're paranoid, Lieutenant. That's probably tin foil." The others chuckled. One of them muttered, "Desert plays tricks on new eyes." But Amelia didn't reply. She wasn't seeing tricks. She was seeing patterns. And one of them had just gone very wrong. Amelia Blake didn't speak much, and when she did, her words carried the weight of calculation, not emotion. She had served 12 years across various operational theaters, northern Syria, Somalia, parts of Southeast Asia most soldiers couldn't even pronounce. She wasn't loud, she didn't bark orders, but her name had shown up in more than a few quiet commendations buried inside classified after-action reports. She specialized in EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, not the flashy kind of warfighting, the kind that required sitting still while death waited centimeters away. Amelia had learned early. You don't get second chances with pressure plates. Her transfer to Echo Team, stationed near the Nevada test ranges, had come with no fanfare. The team had lost their previous EOD specialist to a spinal injury, not in combat, but from a failed training jump. It was sudden, abrupt, and resented. When Amelia arrived, no one greeted her at the airfield. Her name wasn't on anyone's lips during chow. Her presence barely registered during the first morning briefing. Captain Ryan Dalton, mid-40s, seasoned, ran the unit by precision and repetition. To his credit, he didn't object to her presence, but he didn't endorse it either. In his world, people earned their place through time and fire. Amelia had neither, at least, not with them. Sergeant Leo Kramer, younger, louder, the unofficial voice of the squad, had made his opinion clear within the first hour. "We don't need a theory-heavy transfer," he'd said behind her back. "We need someone who knows our ground." The others, Mason, Torres, Delaney, and Fisk, followed his lead, not hostile, but skeptical. Amelia felt it. In the pauses during mission planning, in the silence when she offered an observation, in the sideways glances when she tightened her kit a bit too meticulously. The terrain they operated in was unforgiving. Miles of open valley, jagged rock formations, abandoned Cold War testing infrastructure, rusted pipes, fractured bunkers, derelict fences. To most, it looked empty, but to Amelia, it looked like possibility. Not the good kind. She knew what could hide in soft dirt. She'd memorized how wires behaved in dry heat, how a poorly assembled device could still kill 6 men without making a sound. The squad's routines had become muscle memory. Same paths, same scans. It had worked before, but routine can breed arrogance, and arrogance is what gets people killed. Their mission profile was simple route security and observation patrols. Nothing fancy. Check known coordinates, flag anything new, report back to command. But lately, Amelia had noticed something subtle. Too subtle for radar, too subtle for pattern-matching algorithms. It was the placement of trash, the absence of animal tracks where they should have been, the shifts in dirt piles that didn't match wind patterns. Each by itself was meaningless. Together, they whispered something different. She documented everything, but she kept it quiet. A part of her wanted to earn their trust through action, not correction. Another part knew in this kind of work. Trust came after survival, not before. Still, the pressure built. Each patrol, she felt a little more certain, not of a specific threat, but of an intent. Someone was watching, preparing, learning their routine, waiting for one arrogant step too far. Then came the third patrol. Standard route, midday heat, visibility limited by terrain shimmer and elevation shift. She noted 3 things within the first 20 minutes. A crushed energy drink can with no rust-fresh placement. A string of pebbles lined unnaturally near a drainage pipe. An exposed edge of metallic casing under half an inch of dust. She stopped, marked the spot. Called it out. Possible anomaly, she said, same tone as ever. Calm, direct, unemotional. Leo didn't even break stride. You're paranoid, he laughed. Seen too many war movies. Even Captain Dalton barely looked up. Amelia said nothing else, she simply logged the coordinates. As they moved forward, her eyes lingered on the glint, not because it was obvious, but because it was deliberate. Someone wanted it to be seen. Someone wanted them to dismiss it. She had seen this before once, outside Raqqa, a fake wire designed to draw attention, while the real device waited under the second step. That time, she had listened to her instinct. That time, she had saved 3 lives. This time, she wasn't sure anyone would listen. The third patrol was logged as routine. Echo Team had done this stretch twice before without incident. Captain Dalton briefed the team at 0700. Sector Delta 4, entry via Southern Ravine, 5-click sweep, eyes open, report anomalies, back by 1300. Standard procedure, standard tone. But Amelia Blake heard something else, a creeping overconfidence in the way the team nodded, half listening. Routine had become rhythm, and rhythm breeds blind spots. The terrain was deceptive. What looked like barren desert was actually a patchwork of elevation dips, drainage ditches, and buried structures, remnants of long decommissioned testing fields from the 60s. Satellite intel showed no movement. Drones had flown the route 2 days earlier. Clean, cold, still. But satellites don't feel tension, and drones don't hear silence that's too quiet. By 0900, the team had inserted 2 MR apps brought them within half a mile of their start point. From there, dismounted movement. Leo Kramer and Mason Ward took point. Corporal Delaney covered rear. Amelia held center left with Torres just ahead. The patrol moved in wedge formation textbook. But Amelia noticed the formation was looser than usual. Spacing was off, too relaxed. No one said it aloud, but the absence of enemy contact had dulled the edge. Nothing out here but dust and rattlesnakes, Mason muttered. 15 minutes in, the first sign appeared. Near a cracked drainage pipe, Amelia spotted a faded footprint too fresh to be from last week's sweep. The heel was sharp, the imprint deep. Not windblown, not eroded, recent. She tapped her comm once, no voice, just a signal, a silent mark. Leo didn't look back. They crossed into the blind ridge zone at Aero 937. A known dip in elevation with poor radio bounce and 0 satellite cover. It had been cleared before, but cleared once doesn't mean safe forever. It was here that Amelia slowed her pace. Something wasn't fitting. There were no scavenger marks near the remains of an old test fixture usually. Small animals or birds left some sign, but it was untouched. Too untouched. She glanced at the cliff edge to the right, low enough for observation, high enough to remain hidden. She marked that too. Still, the team pressed forward, chatting occasionally, even laughing. Sound carried farther than they realized. At 0946, they reached a narrow choke point, a 15-foot stretch where terrain funneled them between a shallow embankment and a man-made wall of old concrete slabs. A textbook ambush spot, but it had been quiet before, so they walked it again. That's when Amelia saw it. Barely visible, just a corner of metal peeking from beneath dust near the base of the wall. Maybe a can, maybe not. She called out, calm and direct. Anomaly left side, base of wall. Recommend pause and confirm. Leo kept walking. Again, he smirked. Lieutenant, you gotta relax. It's trash. You think the desert's out to get us today? A few chuckles followed. Captain Dalton looked back briefly but said nothing. The team kept moving. Amelia didn't argue. She simply slowed her pace even more, marking the location on her wrist pad and keeping her eyes moving. She knew what this could be a test. Not of her, of them. A strategically placed decoy meant to see if patrols would react. And if they didn't, the real trap would come next time, when the decoy was replaced with something real. But there was something more urgent here. Too much alignment, too much quiet. Then she saw the secondary indicator, a disrupted patch of soil, 10 feet further, too smooth, too intentional. She stopped. Again. This time, she spoke louder. Stop! Left flank has pattern disturbance. Repeat, stop. Her voice didn't rise, but the tone changed. It was enough to make Mason pause. He looked down, squinting. Hold up, Sarge, he began. Leo turned, annoyed. It's just sand. Then his expression changed. Amelia's eyes had locked on something behind him. A glint of copper, curved, thin. Not trash. Tripline, she said flatly. 5 degrees behind your boot. Everyone froze. For a moment, it was like the entire desert held its breath. No birds, no breeze, just 6 soldiers suddenly realizing. They weren't the only ones out here. Time stretched thin. The squad didn't move, not forward, not back. Amelia's voice had sliced through the routine like a blade, and now, every man in Echo Team was frozen in place, eyes shifting, brains recalculating. Sergeant Kramer turned toward her, this time without the usual grin. Are you sure, he asked? The humor drained from his voice. Amelia didn't answer right away. She stepped forward carefully, deliberately keeping her weight low, her eyes locked on the thin copper arc now exposed beneath a crust of wind-blown dust. She knelt, produced a compact mirror from her vest, angled it beneath the glint. Confirmed. Copper wiring, partially exposed, not wind-placed. The line led into the base of the wall, a crumbling structure of rebar and concrete. No obvious IED, no pressure plate visible. But this wasn't built to be seen. It was built to delay reaction, to test hesitation. Captain Dalton stepped forward cautiously. Why didn't drones catch this, he muttered. Amelia responded without looking up. It's too subtle, no thermal, no metallic shape outside the ground. Whoever did this knows our optics. She traced the wire, not with her hands, with her eyes. It disappeared into the earth. No blast crater, no trigger, yet... Which meant one thing. The device wasn't intended to explode. Not today. It was there to see what they'd do. She stood up slowly. It's a decoy, she said. A live one, maybe, but not the main threat. Leo scoffed quietly. So, you're saying this is fake? No, she replied calmly. I'm saying it's phase 1. A long silence followed. No one wanted to admit what that implied, that this route considered routine, predictable, had been watched, that someone was studying their habits, and now, adapting. That was the kind of danger that didn't announce itself with a bang. It crawled in slow, measured, waited. They moved again slowly, this time, spacing adjusted, chatter silenced. Amelia took rear overwatch, now scanning not just the path ahead, but the terrain behind, looking for high ground, signs of movement, reflections that didn't belong. Torres shifted beside her. You think we're being watched, he whispered. Amelia didn't answer, but she scanned the ridgeline again. Euro 939 hours. Another anomaly, this time subtle but undeniable. Near the embankment, a small pile of rocks had shifted positions. To the untrained eye, it was nothing. But to Amelia, the symmetry was unnatural, as if arranged by human hands trying to mimic randomness. She dropped to one knee, raised her scope. High on the ridge, just for a moment, the sun caught something, a flicker, a reflection. Gone in a second. Lens flare. Or a scope. She didn't say anything. Not yet. Euro 943 hours. Captain Dalton called a full stop. The team was 10 meters from a bottleneck, a narrow channel between 2 outcroppings of basalt. It was a natural terrain feature, one they'd passed through twice before without incident. But Amelia felt the weight in her chest tighten, not from fear, from pattern recognition. Everything pointed here. She walked forward slowly. As she neared the gap, her boot caught on something firm but unseen. She stopped, looked down. The soil was packed too tight, the kind of tightness that comes from being dug and refilled. "Captain," she said quietly, "we have movement-prepped ground." Dalton moved up. His expression was tense now, not doubtful. "IED. Possible," she replied, "but more likely pressure-activated, targeted for a point man." Kramer took 2 steps back. No one said a word. Then a sharp click, soft, almost imperceptible, but Amelia heard it. It wasn't under her, it was behind her. She turned slowly and saw Mason frozen in place. His left boot was sunk slightly lower into the dust, too low. Amelia didn't blink. "Nobody move," she said. The entire patrol locked into place. The desert fell silent again. Amelia stepped toward him. 3 slow steps, her hands empty, her voice steady. "Mason, I need you to breathe. Keep your weight distributed. Do not shift." He nodded stiffly, his jaw clenched. It clicked, didn't it? She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she knelt, examined the ground around his boot. There it was. A shallow steel casing, partial exposure, circular seam. Not a fake, not a warning. This one was real. Time didn't slow down. It stopped. The click beneath Mason's boot had changed everything. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the wind seemed to hold back. Amelia crouched beside him, eyes scanning the soil, reading it like a surgeon reads a wound. "Tilt your boot slightly forward," she said quietly. Mason obeyed, barely shifting pressure. Amelia slipped a mirror under the sole. The reflection told her everything. Steel plate, round edge, homemade housing, trigger built for pressure, not release. Classic pressure-activated device, she muttered. But this wasn't standard enemy craftsmanship. The wiring was too clean, the components too deliberate. This was built by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Captain Dalton's voice broke the silence. "Can you disarm?" Amelia didn't look up. "Yes, but not from here. I need my tools, and he can't move." Dalton nodded once, his jaw tight. "Torres, cover left. Leo, keep your eyes on the ridge. No one else moves." The tension was suffocating. Amelia retrieved a compact tool roll from her thigh pouch, unrolled it slowly on the dirt. Each tool gleamed dull silver in the light, not a sound, not a word. She spoke to Mason again. "You're going to feel pressure shift as I dig around your boot. You'll hear metal. You do not move. Understand?" He nodded, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. She began. Her gloved fingers removed the topsoil in light brushes, not scooping, not digging. Brushing. Grain by grain. It took minutes to expose the full device casing. Amelia identified 4 components immediately. Pressure plate. Main charge casing. Battery source fresh. Secondary anti-tamper wire coiled under the plate. That last one mattered most. "Secondary wire is active," she said. "Any vertical shift triggers a bypass." Leo swore under his breath. Torres didn't say a word. Captain Dalton's gaze stayed on Amelia, the calm in a tightening storm. She leaned in closer, breath measured, movement slower than human instinct. She used a hooked blade to separate 2 soil layers. Then, with needlepoint tweezers, she began working around the pressure switch casing, isolating the contact pins. 1 pin had already flexed. A millimeter more and Mason would have been vaporized. She stopped, thought. "Mason, how much pressure do you think you're putting down?" His voice cracked. "Maybe 70, 80 pounds. Good, don't change that." Amelia retrieved a small block of rigid foam, cut it precisely, measured the gap beneath his boot with a plastic shim. She was building a support wedge, something to replace the pressure his boot applied without triggering a spike. One wrong calculation, and the bypass wire would fire. No second chance. She slid the wedge in slowly, letting it take the weight. "On my count," she said. "You lift straight up, no angle, no twist." Mason didn't respond, just stared ahead, pale. Amelia met his eyes. "You got this. Ready?" He swallowed hard, nodded. 3, 2, 1. He stepped up. Click. But not the wrong kind. The device held. She instantly pressed the foam into place and pinned it down with her body weight. Sweat rolled from her temple, but her hands didn't flinch. Then she cut the anti-tamper wire. Clean! Final! The circuit was broken. Device is disarmed, she said. No one spoke. Not yet. Mason stepped back, shaky, but intact. He looked down at the half-buried nightmare and whispered, I was standing on that thing for minutes. Amelia rolled the rest of the dirt back over it, marked it with chalk, and stood. She didn't smile, didn't collapse in relief. She just nodded to Captain Dalton. Recommend full route abort. This wasn't random. Dalton gave one small nod. Copy that. He tapped his comm. Echo team to base. Confirm active device. Extraction needed. Standby med team. As they waited for pickup, Leo finally spoke, voice low. Back there, if you hadn't said something. Amelia cut him off gently. You weren't supposed to believe me. You were supposed to survive. Silence returned. But it wasn't awkward. It was earned. They didn't talk much after that. Echo team moved as one, slower, more careful. Shadows of their former selves. Confidence had been replaced with calculation, and every eye, whether they admitted it or not, now drifted to Amelia Blake. But she didn't seek their gaze. She walked with the same quiet presence, boots hitting dirt in rhythm, scanning the terrain like nothing had changed. Only everything had... Extraction arrived at 10:15. A single Blackhawk stirred the air as it hovered low over the basin, kicking up waves of dust. The team boarded one by one. Mason last, still shaky, still processing. Amelia sat at the rear, facing outward. Her eyes scanned the horizon, even now. Back at Forward Operating Station, Sentinel-3, no one said a word in the debrief room. Captain Dalton stood at the front, arms folded, his after-action notes untouched on the tablet. Finally, he looked up, spoke clearly. We were compromised. No arguments. Device placement was precise, patterned. No doubt we've been watched, mapped, possibly for weeks. He glanced toward Amelia. Lieutenant Blake identified the anomaly. Disarmed the device under pressure, no casualties. He didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just stated the facts. It was enough. After the briefing, Leo approached her in the corridor, not in a dramatic gesture, just a quiet, hesitant walk. He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he leaned against the wall beside her. About earlier, he began, then stopped. She didn't respond. He tried again. We've had guys transferred in before. Never saw anything we didn't already know. A pause. You saw it before it saw us. Still, she said nothing. Finally, Leo nodded just once. Glad you were there. She replied with a nod of her own. Nothing more. That was enough, too. Later that evening, the team gathered around the fire pit outside the barracks, a rare moment of decompression. Usually, it was all laughs, stories, cigars. Tonight, it was different. Mason sat with a cup of coffee, both hands wrapped around it like it was life itself. He hadn't spoken much since the incident, but as Amelia passed by, he looked up. You ever get used to it? He asked quietly. She stopped. Used to what? Knowing something's wrong, and nobody listens. She considered the question, took her time. You don't get used to it, she said. You get better at trusting yourself, even if no one else does. He nodded, slowly. Well, I trust you now. Amelia offered him a quiet look, not cold, not warm, just real. That's not the point, she said, and with that, she walked on. 2 days later, an internal report from intelligence confirmed that unknown actors had likely been conducting passive surveillance on Echo Team's patrol routes for over a month. The IED wasn't meant to kill, not yet. It was a test, a probe, an invitation to drop their guard. And Echo Team nearly had... Amelia filed her standard report and submitted a quiet recommendation. Route intervals must vary, no repetition, no assumptions. She didn't reference herself, didn't point fingers, just facts, just tactics. It was approved within the hour. When a replacement EOD tech arrived the next week, Amelia didn't stick around. She was already reassigned, called back to a rapid response unit prepping for deployment overseas. As she packed her gear, Captain Dalton stopped by her bunk. He didn't say much. "You were right," he said. Amelia didn't look up from her duffel. "I wasn't trying to be—" Dalton exhaled slowly. "We'll remember what happened out there." She nodded once, closed the bag. "Just remember why it almost happened." And then she was gone. Amelia Blake's name was never etched into a plaque. There were no headlines, no interviews, no parades. Just a line in the mission log, a box checked under IED identified and neutralized, no casualties. But for the 6 men in Echo Team, the silence left behind said more than any medal could. 2 weeks later, the same patrol route remained off limits. Command had rerouted all foot traffic and assigned new aerial overwatch protocols. The terrain hadn't changed, but the understanding had. There are places that look safe, until someone reminds you that safety, in war, is usually just an illusion. Leo Kramer stood alone at the edge of the same embankment where the pressure plate had nearly taken Mason's leg or his life. He wasn't on duty, just looking. No mission, no orders, just reflection. He kicked at the dirt gently with the heel of his boot, careful not to press too hard. His eyes settled on a single chalk mark Amelia had made and left behind, faint now, nearly gone. But he still saw it. Back at base, Mason had started journaling, not because anyone told him to, but because he needed to get it out, that feeling of standing still while death waited beneath him. He wrote about how she didn't flinch, how she never told him it was going to be okay, only told him what had to happen. "She didn't rescue me," he wrote. "She led me out." There was a difference. Captain Dalton, known for keeping his emotions sealed tight, did something out of character. He printed Amelia's field notes and distributed them across the entire operating station. The cover page read, "Observational markers in low signature terrain. A field guide. Author Lot Blake." Nothing fancy, no fanfare, but underlined in red was her final paragraph. "Trust isn't built by talking louder. It's earned through consistency, restraint, and action. In conflict zones, the loudest voice is rarely the smartest one. Listen to the quiet." That line stayed with him. With all of them. A month passed. Amelia deployed again, this time embedded with a marine engineering unit overseas. Her new team didn't know her past, didn't know what had happened in Nevada. But they noticed how she listened more than she spoke, how she paused when the terrain shifted, how she walked as if the ground might whisper to her, if only she stayed quiet long enough. Somewhere, in another briefing room, another young soldier probably dismissed her first observation. That's how these things usually start. But maybe someone else on that team had heard the story. Maybe someone had listened to the quiet. And maybe that changed everything. In the end, Amelia didn't need recognition. What she needed, what she had always needed, was precision and a chance to act when it mattered. And that chance had come, without warning, without ceremony. And she had answered it the only way she knew how. Calm, focused, unshaken. The desert keeps its secrets. But some truths remain. Like this one. The soldier you dismissed today might be the only reason you come home tomorrow. In every unit, there's someone who doesn't quite fit. Too quiet. Too analytical. Too different. And often, they're the ones who get ignored. But the battlefield doesn't care about rank or popularity. It only responds to preparedness, to the soldier who notices what others miss, to the voice no one wants to hear until it's too late. Amelia Blake didn't argue her place. She didn't demand validation. She let her actions speak when it mattered most. And that's the quiet lesson Echo Team carried home. Sometimes, survival isn't about strength. It's about the one person who refuses to look away when something feels off, the one who trusts instinct, even when everyone else laughs, the one who sees what others ignore and acts anyway. The battlefield doesn't reward pride, it rewards clarity under pressure. And that day, Amelia had it. If the story stayed with you, you're welcome to stay with us. There are more like it, quiet stories, hard lessons, moments that changed everything without making a sound. Feel free to leave a thought below. We read them carefully. And if you'd like to hear more, you know where to find us. We'll be here, waiting for the next story to surface.